Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest Legal Cheek virtual student event in partnership with BARBRI. I'm Juliet Griffiths, Head of Student Engagement here at Legal Cheek, and I'm very excited to introduce this afternoon's session. As the title suggests, we're going to be hearing from students about their SQE2 success stories, as well as their overall experiences of SQE2, just to give you a bit of a glimpse into what it's like. So I'm delighted to introduce Joanne White, Senior Tutor at BARBRI, who will host this afternoon's session, as well as Kat, Kate and Sasha, our panellists. In just a moment, I'm going to drop off stage to allow our speakers to introduce themselves properly. But before I do so, I'm just going to very quickly explain how this afternoon's event will work. For the next hour, we'll be hearing from our speakers about SQE2. At around 5 p.m, I will pop back up on stage and direct everyone to the expo for 30 minutes or so of networking with the speakers. And this is a really great opportunity to ask any of your burning questions directly to our panelists. So please do stick around for that. During this session here on stage, you can also ask your questions as we go along in the chat tab, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. Just make sure that you've got your chat set to stage, not event, so that we can see your comments as they come through. Without any further ado, I'm going to hand straight over to Joanne. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this event. My name is Joanne White, and I'm a Senior Tutor with BARBRI, and I've been involved with the delivery of all our SQE courses since the very beginning. It's great to see so many of you here this afternoon. Now, the goal of today is to try and demystify SQE2 for you. So whether you are yet to embark on your SQE journey or you're in the middle of your SQE2 journey, the aim of this session is to give you some information and some tips to help you on your path to successful completion of SQE2. To help me do this, I am joined by a wonderful panel who are happy to share their experience of SQE2 with you and to provide you with some advice on how best to approach the exam and your studies leading up to that exam. We have a number of questions already submitted, so we're going to start with those. We'll try and get through as many of them as we can in the next hour, but as you heard, you can also pop any questions in the chat should you wish to throughout the session. So let me introduce you to our panel, all of whom have passed SQE2 with BARBRI. So as you heard, we have Kat, Kath and Sasha. So I'm going to pass you over to them now individually so they can introduce themselves to you properly and give you a little bit of background about themselves. So Kat, can I start with you?
Of course. Thank you so much, Joanne. I hope you can all hear me well. My name is Katerina, but you can call me Kat. That's a shorter version. And now I can proudly say that I'm a solicitor qualified under England and Wales jurisdiction. It's been a long way, but here I am. I currently work as an IP solicitor, so specialize in intellectual property law and some tech law, commercial aspects of it. And I work in a company called Sterling Law. It's a boutique law firm in London. And I have successfully completed SQE1 and SQE2, both studied with BARBRI, both at first attempt. As you can also probably get from the way I speak, I'm not a native English speaker. English is not my native language. And I think that's kind of important if your English is not your native language as well. It kind of highlights that you can also pass the SQE even if it's not your mother tongue. What else should I mention about myself? I came to the UK to study LLM at UCL. So I did my IP and LLM and intellectual property law at the UCL University in London, and just started after that doing my training with Sterling Law. In parallel, I think I worked at Sterling Law for like almost 7 years. So I got my training there in different seats. And I also in parallel worked as a legal consultant as well. And my overall legal education is from Belarus. That's where I grew up. Yeah, that would be all about myself.
Great. Thank you very much, Kat. Can I move on to you now, Kate?
Yeah, so my name is Kate Herbert. I qualified as a solicitor last August after what felt like an absolute lifetime. So I am now a residential property solicitor at Knights PLC. They're the largest regional law firm outside of London. So I actually graduated in 2012, but didn't sit SQE1 until 2022. So it was a good 10 years since I'd sat any exams for a while. And did that alongside working full time at a national conveyancing firm and also having two small children. So I always say to anybody who is wondering whether they can do it alongside working full time, if I can do it working full time with two small children, then yes, you definitely can. That's not to say it's not a challenge, but I think it's completely doable if you just kind of break it down into pieces. And I massively believe on quality over quantity of revision. You're best to kind of do a good solid hour of good revision rather than doing like a whole day, for example, because your brain obviously switches off after that time. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Fabulous. Thanks, Kate. And Sasha.
Hiya. So my name's Sasha, and I studied law and sociology at Warwick University. And then I started my role as a paralegal in the commercial property team of quite a small firm in Bristol. And while I was doing that, I was studying for SQE1 with BARBRI, which I sat at the end of January in 2023. Same as Kat, passed first time, like for both of them. And after passing SQE1, my firm offered to sign off some of my qualifying work experience as a paralegal, and had also offered me to do some different seats, which was great because that was exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't know which area I wanted to qualify into, and actually it was really lucky that I did because I've ended up in employment law. So I'm a brand new NQ. I qualified literally a couple of months ago, so still getting to grips with everything. But yeah, so now I'm an employment law solicitor at Thrings.
Fabulous. Thanks, Sasha. So thanks for all those introductions. Very inspirational stories, and obviously proof that it can be done. So let's move on to some of the questions that people submitted in advance of this session. And Kat, if I can start with you, how much studying is needed to succeed on SQE2? How many hours do you recommend a day?
Thank you. That's a good question. I think when looking at this, I would probably focus on consistency. So if we're talking about the number of hours you want to study, rather approach it like by daily study rather than 5 hours a week. 1 hour every day would give you more than 5 hours one day a week, let's say. And when we're talking about the time frame, so assuming, of course, SQE2 follows SQE1, so you successfully passed this, I would say probably around 4 months. It can be done like in different time frames. For me, I've chosen a longer path for the reason that I wanted to build this into my daily life. I didn't want this to be like a 10-week quick retainer, 5-hour study a day, just build it in my life. And it worked pretty well. But again, I would highlight that being consistent is way more important than doing 5 hours a week. That would be my advice.
Great, thank you. And Sasha, if I could come to you, what level or depth of knowledge of the FLK, the functioning legal knowledge materials, would you say that candidates need to master in order to sit the exams? Is it detailed knowledge? Is it an overview?
I think it's somewhere in between. So, I mean, obviously for SQE1, you have to know literally everything because you're going to be tested on the really minor details. But for SQE2, I wouldn't say it's nearly in as much detail as that, but you have to know it in as much detail that you're able to actually advise on it. And I mean, BARBRI has sort of FLK tests, don't they, included in the course that you can use to see where you're at with it. And I think someone told me before that SQE1, they'll test you on the exception to the rule, but SQE2, it's the rule. And I mean, I'm not saying don't learn the exceptions to the rules, but I think as kind of a general approach, I think, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difference really from SQE1 to SQE2 is that SQE1 is all black letter law, isn't it?
Exactly,
And
yeah.
kind of, if I know the rule, I will be okay because the correct answer is in front of me
Yeah.
somewhere. And that kind of gives you a little bit more confidence. In terms of how the SRA approach SQE2 is they expect you to take a little bit of that law, not all of it, a little bit of that law from SQE2, and they test you in 6 skills. So really, it's a skills-based exam, although students don't often see it that way, do they? But you need to then be able to explain the law in a way that a client would understand, and that's a skill in itself. So yeah, it's different. So you're right. I think it's a mix between the two, in order to get you through. Great, thank you, Sasha. Kate, can I come to you? And what would you say are the main challenges of this exam? Certainly in terms of your experience, what were the main challenges that you faced?
I'd say for me personally, obviously, it was quite hard for me juggling full-time work with the girls. But I think the biggest challenge that I've kind of heard when talking to others about SQE is just the confidence and mindset that you kind of need to have going into it. It's a complete emotional roller coaster. And I don't think you really come out the same person as you kind of go in, because you do have to build that, that strength of character. And I was lucky enough to pass SQE1 and SQE2 first time round, but that isn't always the case. And I always think it's really hard to get yourself back into that mindset if you're not fortunate enough to do it the first time round. But also, those kickbacks make you more determined as long as you don't let it defeat you. So I think believing that you can is often hard. If you believe you can, you're halfway there. And it's just having that confidence, which comes from practice. So if you can just keep practicing the skills, building your level of knowledge, then you're going to get confidence in knowing the areas that you need to know, which then again just adds to your strengths and helps you get through it. But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
No, it's absolutely not. Thank you. And Kat, if I can come to you, certainly as a tutor on SQE2, I can let you know that a lot of students find it very daunting to deal with the oral skills, so the advocacy and the interviewing. What was your approach and your experience to that side of the course?
Yeah, I can imagine it's hard, the speaking part, especially because it's personal as well. So you're talking to a real examiner. I think a couple of approaches here. First of all, try and practice out loud. There is a joke, like sometimes you say, like, I sound smarter in my head than I actually speak, because when you speak, there are so many things coming in your mind and you want to say everything, but then you kind of find yourself in a very uncomfortable situation. It's like, oh my God, what am I saying? Really say things out loud, and record yourself, because you cannot always you can't always express precisely what's in your head, right? So practicing will give you that, and if you record yourself, either it's a video or audio. I think when you record for BARBRI, when you do tutoring for BARBRI, you submit your visual recording. They are embarrassing. It's okay. By this stage, you kind of get used to it, but it does help. You listen to yourself and you're like, okay, this I can say quicker, this I can say slower, this I can say concisely. And okay, so practicing out loud would be my best advice. Second would probably be practice with a study buddy or someone even if they have no background in law, which is really helpful. My friends who are not lawyers gave me really good advices. They would say, you said the thing that I didn't understand. And that would be a huge flag for me. Okay, this approach needs to be changed, because actually when you're doing your orals, you're doing them for clients. Okay, the judge would be another audience, but let's say the client study buddy will help you with the client part. And the third thing would probably be, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 25% of your mark. And I think knowing that if you master your oral skills, your delivery of those presentations, 25, it's good for your 25%, but if you're not perfect with it, if the oral part is not your best side, it's just 25%, so you can focus on the written part. So there are ups and downs in those 25%. Yeah, that would be my key 3 takeaway. And when it's live, when you're doing your SQE2, when it's actually happening, I think you need to realize that everyone is in the same boat. No one is perfect. No one is a qualified solicitor there apart from the examiners, and they're there to help you, not to like put you down. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly from a tutor perspective, often students are most nervous about the oral assessments. Perhaps it's the first time they've ever kind of experienced anything like that, but often they do far better in the orals and sometimes in the written, and certainly far better in the orals than they ever imagined they would. Because it is so nerve-wracking if you don't have any experience. And often we find ourselves saying to students, this isn't about lack of ability, this is about lack of confidence. And as Kat says, it's about practice, practice, practice will help you with that confidence. So yeah, absolutely great advice there, Kat. Thank you for that. I'll come to you for this one, Sasha, but it might be that anybody can chip in with their experience. We give you a lot of materials, obviously, at BARBRI, but were there any other resources, free or low-cost resources that you found surprisingly helpful, or did you just stick to the BARBRI resources on SQE2?
Yeah, I mainly just stuck to the BARBRI resources, to be honest. I mean, I think the SRA website has some sort of sample questions, but there aren't loads of them. But I think it is worth having a look at those. And then I think just sort of self-made resources as well. Like I made quite a lot of flashcards and notes and stuff. And then I guess a resource as well would be your family and friends. Like that, my partner was testing me all the time. And it is really helpful, I think, to just keep going over stuff and keeping it fresh in your mind. Sort of making up scenarios that you can interview people on. Yeah, they were the main resources other than the BARBRI stuff that you get given that I found to be really helpful.
Yeah. Kate or Kat, do you have any experience of using any other free resources, or did you just stick to the BARBRI materials as well?
So I use the BARBRI materials a lot. In terms of advocacy, I found YouTube to be quite handy with people recording kind of stuff on there. You could see good examples and, they're not so good examples. In terms of other paid things, I found the Devil's Advocate really helpful, which were quite reasonably priced, and also a lady called Madeline Weber in-house. Her revision notes were really, really good, really nicely condensed. So that was quite a good resource for kind of like lighter revision in like the later stages, I'd say. And she did also kind of provide additional mocks, which is always nice to get more practice.
Great, thank you. Kat?
Yeah, I didn't use any additional resources.
Okay, great.
If that's helpful. And still passed, so.
Yeah, I mean, we do give you a lot of the resources. We give you everything that you need. I think one of the challenges is there is so much to do. It's kind of a packed program, whether you do the 20-week course or the 10-week course. Adding in an external resource just adds to the time that you've got to spend. And sometimes, even if the material is absolutely as it should be, it's perhaps delivered in a different way, or you've got to kind of switch your mindset to be able to deal with it, and it just adds to the amount of time that you've got to spend in preparation, which if most students are working, that's a tricky thing to do in itself. So it's great to hear that you found the BARBRI resources sufficient for allowing you to get to where you got to. Just while we're on the kind of subject of other resources, let's just quickly talk about funding. There's been a few questions about funding. Were you all self-funding? Were you sponsored students? Kat, could I come to you first on that?
I was self-funded for BARBRI, yeah.
Okay. Kate?
I was sponsored through my firm, so I was really lucky.
Okay. Sasha?
Yeah, I self-funded as well, which was the reason why I had to work like full time to be able to do it. And I think that's the same with quite a lot of people doing the exams. But I mean, as Kate said, you know, if she can work full time and have 2 kids and do it, then anyone can. It's great.
Sure.
Absolutely. Okay, and next question is, was it challenging to pivot from studying for SQE1 to SQE2? A great question. Kate, could I come to you first on that one, please?
I'd say it was a different kind of way of learning, really. So with SQE1, given the exams are MCQ style, you kind of got memory joggers. So, you know, you knew that the answer was there, and it was, you know, you had to then decide which one was the best one for this scenario. Whereas with SQE2, there was no memory joggers. So you had to know the core principles, but also not just knowing it, but how to apply it, which is, I think, is what you're being assessed more on with SQE2. It's okay knowing the law, but you've then got to apply and advise, you know, the client on their particular scenario. So I think in that side of things, it was, you know, more challenging. I tried to probably bullet point core principles, but then also kind of try and train my brain into kind of creating a chain of joggers itself. So for director's duties, for example, maybe considering, you know, what did or didn't require director approval, shareholder approval, and then, you know, with that was actual authority, apparent authority. So one topic could then kind of jog your memory for different things that might apply in that scenario. So that's what I kind of tried to do. And again, flashcards, I love those. And my husband was probably fed up. He probably knew it just as well as I did by the end, because he was like, yeah, you know, it's fine. But yeah, flashcards, don't underestimate them. I think they're great.
Fabulous, thank you. Sasha or Kat, anything to add to that in terms of the difficulty in going from one to the other?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
I was just gonna, sort of the same thing, really. I mean, it is harder because you don't have those prompts, so it's harder in that way. But I mean, I actually found SQE2 a lot easier than SQE1, because I think for me, SQE1, the level of detail that it goes into, I mean, I just struggled to sort of retain that amount of knowledge for SQE1. But for SQE2, I found sort of the more practical application of things more easy to do. And I actually did better in SQE2 than SQE1 by quite a long way. So I actually found it easier, but I think it is a hard transition because they're 2 very different sets of exams as well. And it is, you sort of learn to study for SQE1 and then you have to completely relearn how you're going to do everything.
I 100% agree with you, Sasha. It was like, for me, it was always almost like I didn't expect that. I did SQ1 and I was so happy. I just jumped straight into SQ2, almost straight. No, I did like a small break, but like it was already on my mind that, okay, I'm going to do SQ2. And I didn't really do a very detailed research of what it entails. I was like, if I did SQ1, I kind of know what SQ2 looks like drafting and whatnot, and like oral part. It turned out that those were 2 completely different things, like so unrelated almost, apart from its legal knowledge. But SQ2 is way different than SQ1. This needs to be taken into account, especially when you do the transition from one to another. Yeah, that's I 100% agree with Sasha and Kate on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky transition, and that because they are very, very different exams, and the approach to studying for them is very different. As I say, that the SRA take a different approach, and it's kind of switching into that mindset for what the SRA want you to achieve. And obviously, you know, practicing the skills helps you in practice, and hopefully now you're in practice, you can kind of implement some of those skills that you learn with the confidence that you attained on the course, which is absolutely great. Okay, let's move on. And we have a question. In your preparation for SQE2, did you find it more important to focus on remembering the law, or to spend more time practicing applying the skills in mock tests and assessments? And how did you find the right balance? Kate, if I could start with you on that one, please.
I'd say it's good to have a good mix. So I kind of broke down, I printed off the syllabus and kind of like split the topics, and I try and do 2 topics a week. And I try and build on the core principles, but also once I'd kind of got to a level where I thought, okay, I'm remembering this, I know how to apply it, I'd then do a practice question to then see how much I could apply from memory, and then switch it up each week, and did it that way. And then I've already mentioned flashcards, so I don't need to go through that again. But I definitely say it's good to have a good mix. I think it's quite easy if you've got a legal job alongside, because there are obviously skills that you will be building at the time that you're working. So I was quite used to talking to clients, running my own files and things like that, and drafting. But if that's not always the case for everybody, so don't neglect the skills base and just focus on the FLK, because you do need a balance of both. Which is why I think it's really important to practice those aloud with somebody else. Like Kat had said, practicing with people who aren't legally trained or have no legal knowledge, because then you know how to rephrase or reword something in a way that someone else is going to be able to understand it. I think something else that I did was, for certain things like the written exams and advocacy, I try and not memorize as such, but kind of put together a phrase that I could easily remember so that I could apply it in anything, because you could then apply it to the different facts that you had. But if you had, that kind of generalize or summary of a particular principle, then you could use that in anything, which I always thought was I definitely use that in the exam for sure.
Yeah, great. Sasha, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just sort of adding on, I think it's really important to make sure you get the balance, which, it can be quite hard. But I think at the start of the BARBRI course, the advice is, if you need to look stuff up, it's okay, like do that before you do the practice questions. But as you get further along, just try and do it without looking stuff up first, because obviously on the day, you're not going to have access to your materials, you're not going to be able to look stuff up. So I think as you progress, just working out where your areas of weakness are, and then give the practice questions a go. If you don't know the content of the actual SQE1 stuff, have a look at that after, but just see how well you do in terms of the skills, because that's what would happen on the day. And I think it's important to keep doing that as you're going along the course.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kat, same experience for you?
Yeah, same experience. I also would mention that I would not probably recommend just studying legal knowledge in silo. I just find it like when I was going back to my FLK 1 and 2 books and opening the rules, there's so many rules, so much information, so many exceptions, just so overwhelming when you go through that book, and it unreasonably overwhelms you. You don't really need all that knowledge. I think what's better is to have the foundation knowledge, key rules, especially in the context of what is tested on SQE2, and then only when and once needed, you go back to the book and you revise specific things, not like scrolling through the book and realizing, oh my God, there are so many things that I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And certainly from a tutor perspective, we always advise students at the beginning of the course to get involved in the assessments as soon as possible. And sometimes there's a kind of reluctance to kind of start the practice. And students want to think, well, what I'll do is I'll get back up to speed with my SQE1 law knowledge, and then I'll feel confident to be able to tackle the assessments. We never advise that approach. We always advise never revise the law in isolation, because as I said earlier, the SRA are absolutely satisfied you know enough law. That's why you are able to sit SQE2. Now it's about putting it into practice in terms of those 6 skills. So, you've got the oral skills of advocacy and interviewing, and then you've got the written skills of writing, drafting, case and matter analysis, and legal research. And the sooner you start the practice for all of those things, the better you will get. It's like practicing anything. If you were learning to drive, if you were learning to play the guitar, your early experiences of that practice might not be very good, but the more you practice, the better you will get. It's exactly the same with SQE2. And if you try to compartmentalize it and get back up to speed with where you think your legal knowledge needs to be, often it's kind of not aligned because, as I said earlier, it's not as much SQE1 black letter law that you need for SQE2. It's just the bit that clients care about. And clients really don't care about the black letter law. The clients want you to solve their problem. So no client is ever going to come to you as a solicitor and say, could you tell me what Section 12 of the Companies Act says? They don't care. But what they might come to you and say is, I formed a partnership with my brother. We've had a huge falling out. How do I dissolve that partnership? So they want a practical answer. If you've only learned the black letter law, you would struggle more to be able to put that law into layman's terms for a client to be able to understand. So it's very much about the practicing the skills. And as we've heard, you can revise the law in the early stages in order to be able to practice the skill. You're not expected to memorize it. I see in the chat that some people did the LPC, so didn't do SQE1. So that might have been some years ago. Are you at a disadvantage? Absolutely not. We give you all of the black letter law that you need, and we spread that law out throughout the course in the examples and the scenarios that we give you to practice with. So there's no issue with doing the LPC and coming along as an SQE2 for the first time to BARBRI. All of that is covered for you. So thank you everyone for those answers. An interesting question here. I'll be interested in what your response is. If you had to repeat your experience, I'm sure nobody wants to have to go through SQE2 again, but would you do anything differently? And if so, what would that be? Sasha, if I could start with you.
I don't think I'd do anything different in terms of my approach to study, but I think something that I would do differently is just a bit more stress management, because I don't think that I sort of made enough time for myself and looked after myself properly while I was doing it. And it was quite stressful as a result. And I think I had so much self-doubt, and I just completely thought I was going to fail. And I ended up doing really well. So I think just telling myself that I can do it, because it would have made it a lot less stressful, I think, if I actually had some self-belief.
Yeah, it's a common scenario that we get from students. Again, it's a lack of confidence, not lack of ability. And I think once you kind of have that self-belief, and hopefully through the practices, we give you 48 different scenarios throughout the course, a lot of practice in all of the skills multiple times. And hopefully that kind of helps you get to where you need to be. Kate, what about you? Would you do anything differently if you were having to sit SQE2 again?
Oh, wow, what a question. Maybe not work full time and have children, but I couldn't change those things, so sadly not. But I think probably be kinder to myself mentally. I think I struggled a lot with mom guilt, or I've always felt guilty for something. So if I wasn't studying, I'd feel guilty for not studying. But then I was also very strict in giving myself an evening off. So I had to do evenings after the girls had gone to bed. And then I allowed myself probably 4 hours each weekend day to kind of study around life and everything else I had going on. So I think it's really important to give yourself time for yourself and not to feel guilty for that. Because if you burn yourself out with late night studying, your brain is not going to retain that information when it's going non-stop. But then you're also going to be so tired that you're not going to be able to study. That said, if you do feel like you are getting behind with studying, then I'd say don't worry about it, because, you can still do it. I know for a fact that there's probably more time I could have put in, but I couldn't because I had other commitments. So I think definitely be kind to yourself. Even just going for a walk sometimes, just to refresh yourself, does wonders for your mindset. So I'd often just take the dog out for a walk and just think, I'm going to leave these books here. So that was quite a good thing I did. I also use something called Speechify, which I don't know if anyone's heard of. But I used that because there was times when I couldn't be sat physically reading books. So I uploaded a lot of my Barbri notes to Speechify, then I could do other things, drive, do lunches, school drop-offs or whatever. And I could listen. So it was going on in the back of my head while I was doing other things. And I think, unconsciously, my brain still kind of took some of that in. So that was quite nice. But yeah, I don't have to do it again. That's for sure.
Yes. Absolutely. We won't make you, don't worry.
No, thanks so much.
Kat, anything to add to that? Would you do anything differently?
I agree with Kate and Sasha. It's just, I wouldn't do anything differently in terms of my study approach. Just probably being kind to yourself is a very big takeaway, and believing in yourself, which is hard by default. So.
Yeah, and just from your experience of speaking to the tutors, we have 4 tutor calls on the SQE2 course where students have the ability to kind of check in with tutors just to see how they are getting on. Kate, how did you find the tutor calls? Did you find them helpful?
I did find them helpful. I would say I wasn't able to attend quite a lot of them because of working and everything else. But if I needed anything, BARBRI were 100% there. I knew who my tutor was. I was really lucky to have a really great kind of like buddy group that BARBRI had set up for us. So that was really, really supportive. And that was great we kind of created a WhatsApp group, and we'd throw stuff around and, kind of do off cuff and ad hoc kind of get togethers, which was really good. But no, from a tutor perspective, you guys were great.
Great, that's nice to hear. Thank you. Kat, did you make use of the tutor calls?
Yeah, I attended everything. I attended as much as I could. They were very helpful, just even listening in just keeps you on track. And I found the support of BARBRI very helpful overall. We also had a WhatsApp group with the students. I felt very well guided through the process.
Great, thank you. And Sasha?
Yeah, I think the same really. I think I found the sort of group sessions more helpful than the one-to-one, because then you can speak to other people that are like doing it and see how they're getting on. And like the others said, I think, you get a WhatsApp group if you want to do that, which I'll be completely honest, sometimes I did have to mute, because I think sometimes in the lead up to exams, it's just so much noise, isn't it? And it can be quite stressful to sort of compare what you're doing with what everyone else is doing. And I think sometimes it's best to just focus on kind of your own journey. But I think it's helpful if you want if you want to speak to other people.
Yeah, and it's useful to know that was your experience, because what we try to do is, it's an online course, but we try to have as much interaction with students as possible, because sometimes when you hear online course, it sounds quite isolating. And it can kind of feel that there isn't much help if you don't know what you're doing, who you're supposed to ask. But what we try to do through the tutor calls, through our strategy sessions, through our workshops, is, increase engagement and encourage that kind of collaboration between students. So it feels a little bit less online. And certainly when you do your oral assessments, it's a bit like this. Where you've got a tutor playing the judge for advocacy, or they're playing the clients for interviewing. So it's real life interaction, even though it's online. You definitely have that experience. So it is good to kind of hear you say that. We've touched on this a little bit, and certainly with Kate's experience of working and having 2 children. So maybe we'll come to Kat first for this one, in terms of how did you juggle SQE2 alongside work?
Yeah, thank you. I think Kate's experience is we just found out she has a dog as well. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I don't have children. I don't have a dog. And still, I did the work full time, of course, during the prep. I took some time off. I think it's very much possible, when you have a structured day, when you put effort into your daily schedule, and when you also schedule in your free time as well. So you need to be mindful of your work, your free time, and your studies. I think if you've got you understand that those three things exist in your life and you need to create a schedule for them, it's very much possible and achievable. Maybe be transparent with your employer. I think this is very helpful so that they understand how they distribute work available. Sometimes you just have to say no because things can get overwhelming, and if you don't have time to study, that's going to be a challenge by itself. But if you are proactive with your employer, I think they will understand that this is what it takes for you to complete the exam, and honesty is key in this context.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because SQE2 and SQE1 as well is still quite new. A lot of employers kind of just need that education in terms of what is involved. I don't think it's the case so much now, but certainly in the early stages, the fact that SQE1 was a multiple choice exam just made it sound really easy. And I'm sure that your experience is the exact opposite of that. So I think, educate your employers as to how much study is involved. The courses do require a lot of engagement and a lot of study time. And it's a very different way of studying to undergrad studying. So, all of that needs to be factored in as well. But it is doable. All of us, all four of us, I did all my studying part-time as well. I've kind of shared that experience, and we're now all qualified solicitors. So it obviously works. So Sasha, anything you would share in addition to those experiences in terms of how you juggled everything you had to deal with?
I think you just have to be really organised with your time. And as Kat said, I think you've just got to relay what your capacity is. There were quite a lot of times at work when it was really busy, but I did have to say no to stuff, and I couldn't, stay late and things like that because I had study planned for that night. But I think for my employer, it was quite easy for them to see that I was studying as well, because I would literally go into the office. I'd do it in the morning before work. I'd do it on my lunch break. I'd do it after work, but they could physically see that I was doing it. But I think, just to be really open about what you've got on, and make sure that you don't take on too much, because otherwise you're just going to get overloaded and it's going to be really stressful. I think also, be kind to yourself and appreciate that it is going to be tough. It's not an easy thing to do, but if you want to do it, I think you'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of just linked to that, we know that it's very stressful. There's a lot to kind of juggle. It's a very intense period in your life. So did you have any particular routines or habits that helped you when you felt overwhelmed? It was all getting too much. We heard from Kate earlier about walking the dog and kind of just getting outside. Kat, do you have any other experience of what you did to kind of address that overwhelm, which naturally everybody feels at some point?
Yeah, I think walking and being outside is very helpful, even on your own, because your head is buzzing all the time. But also talking to people, talking to friends, sharing how you feel, what you feel. Your friends will always support you. Family, hopefully, always support you. This is just when you are in this situation, it helps so much hearing from other people how they care about you, that there is someone to back you up. The more you share how you feel, the easier it feels, or not easier, but at least manageable. That would be my advice.
Yeah, and Kate, in addition to getting out and walking, was there anything else you kind of made part of your normal routine?
I think just having a plan is really good. I think I had to be quite strict with my time because of everything else. So I had to make sure that if I was giving myself an hour, that I would dedicate that hour to just studying and not get sidetracked. I'd have to put my phone in a drawer so I didn't get distracted or get caught on Instagram or wherever. And I just dedicate that time. So I think, have a plan in place, take regular short breaks, try and get out as much as you can, but also allow yourself to be you. once a week, for example, I always gave myself a night off so that I could, watch a film with hubby or, do something with the girls at the weekend, because, life happens and you kind of have to just allow for life to happen, because it does throw you a curveball and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. But I mean, it's completely off topic, but for me, with some of the topics, they weren't necessarily my strongest. And when I first started, I felt quite intimidated by those. And it was really easy for me to kind of shift towards revising for the stuff I found easy. But I then had a change of mindset and thought, you know what, I feel quite intimidated by business law, but there's a whole day dedicated to business law. So I'm going to make sure that that's actually my strongest subject. And I think for SQE, you kind of have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think if you can do that, then it'll just, make such a difference in the exams and confidence wise as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point, because some of the, the concerns that we hear as a tutor are, I've got a weakness in this area of law, or it manifests itself that there's a weakness in a particular skill. Often legal research is one of those kind of nemesis subjects that students kind of really struggle with. Often because it's very limited time. And in real life, you have a lot longer to kind of do legal research. In SQE2, you have an hour. So, that can kind of cause a lot of stress and overwhelm. And I think from, our point of view, it is important that you take breaks. It is important that you don't use the same techniques that you used for your undergrad. So if you were anything like me, there was a lot of cramming involved. There were a lot of all-nighters pulled, because you kind of got that sense of panic that I just need to know more. I just need to know more. But in SQE2, that doesn't work, because you have to be as calm as possible to pretend to be a solicitor in the real assessments. And so taking breaks, not studying when you're too tired, having a plan, giving yourself a night off is a great one. And that's something that I struggled with. I would try and do some study every night, and realistically, it just wasn't going to happen. Working all day, full time, 5 days a week, and then, every spare minute, every spare hour studying just doesn't work. And then what tended to happen, and Kate talked earlier about guilt, is that you do give yourself a night off. And I remember sitting in the cinema once, watching, I don't even remember what the film was now, because all I was thinking about is the work I should have been doing had I been at home. And actually, so not only did I not do any study, I didn't enjoy the night off anyway. And so I think kind of carving out that time to say, actually, Friday nights, not studying, I'm going to kind of get my life back. And planning it that way is definitely the way forward. The best preparation is to kind of mix it all in with your real life. Otherwise, you can become too overwhelmed, and then all of that law you are kind of trying to remember, all of those skills you are trying to remember, you're so exhausted on the exam days that you don't perform as well as you can. So it really is a balance in terms of juggling everything that you've got to do. But, as we've said already, completely doable. And certainly, us as tutors at BARBRI help students all the time with trying to manage everything that they've got going on in their lives, which makes you, again, feel less isolated. So hopefully that's helpful advice for those of you listening today. Okay, so there's quite a lot of questions been in the chat, and we've got a question that was pre-submitted in terms of revision. So you've gone through the course, you've done all of the assessments, you've got all of your personal tutor feedback, you've done your mock exams, and you've had your final tutor call to talk about those. You then need to focus on final revision. So if we can just kind of focus on how you deal with revision when you've kind of gone through all of those scenarios so far. Sasha, how did you approach final revision once you'd done all of the assessments on the course?
I think for me, the first thing is to actually pay real attention to the feedback that I was given, and then actually work out what it is that I needed to do. So I can't even remember what the feedback was now. I did it quite a while ago, but I remember that I sat down and properly looked at that and worked out what my plan was going to be between that time and the exam. And it obviously is so important to take on that feedback, because that's the reason that you've got X grade. And if you want to do well, like, you know what you need to do to improve it. But I think also, just in terms of not necessarily revision, but just prep for the day, because I was quite worried about getting to the orals, particularly because I live in Bristol and the orals are in Cardiff. So I had to cross the bridge, and I was just a bit worried about the logistics on the day. So I made sure that I did a test run beforehand to work out how long it was going to take to get there, you know, what the parking situation would be and stuff like that. And I think that helped me in the prep for the exams, because it took one stress away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to kind of mitigate as much stress as possible. What are you in control of? What can you do? The least amount of travel, or the more time you give yourself to travel, is definitely part of that prep. Thank you, Sasha. Kat, what about your experience of final revision? How did you approach everything when you'd completed the course?
I agree with Sasha about traveling. It's so important to know where the exam is taking place, how you get in there. Like, don't go on a bike, I don't know, because it's dangerous and something can happen, or your mind wanders. Like, just create the least stressful, just think of the least stressful way to get to the place and know where this is, so that you're not panicking when you're there. And in terms of revision, also, I agree with revising the feedback. This is very helpful. Also, I think on the BARBRI, as far as I remember, there was a table, and was the skills, like where you were able to see what skill are you lacking in accordance with that table. And I found it very helpful to look into that specific areas or specific skills that I was missing. I didn't learn anything new on my revision, and I set it on my head on purpose, like, I'm not learning anything new, because if I find out that I don't know anything, I'll start panicking. So I was just focusing on the material that I knew, redoing some tasks that I did, making, not even fully doing it again, but like even putting on paper, okay, this like structure, this what I would have put for the answer. That was it, what I did.
Great. And Kate, what was your approach to final revision?
I actually did less revision on the run up to the final exams than I thought I would. I think I kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, a bit like what Kat said, I'm not going to try and learn anything new. I'm just going to build confidence in what I already know, and accept the fact that I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for enough. And there's no way that I'm going to be able to remember everything. But what I do remember, I am going to know well. So I like to look over my revision notes, just really light revision, really. A few practice questions here and there. I was quite fortunate that my oral exams, I think, were about a week after my written exams. So I could concentrate fully on the written exams, and then kind of use the week in between to kind of then focus more on just advocacy and interviewing skills wise. I think, I don't know, I'm probably the only one who did this, but I created like a study playlist. So when you kind of like in the trenches, as I kind of say, I think it's really important that you can just stick on some tunes that are really going to uplift you and just make you feel amazing, even if you have a little boogie or whatever you want to do. So I completely did that, and I think it really boosted my mindset. And I played the same tunes as I was driving into, to get to my exams, just to kind of feel like really upbeat and uplifted. So I think that's a really good and quite nice thing to do, just to kind of, I love how music can just kind of escalate your mood. So that worked for me.
Great. Excellent advice. Thank you for that. So we've touched on this a little bit already, but I think a lot of people would want to know, what are your feelings? How did you kind of approach the actual real exams? So, the SQE2 exams are split over 5 half days, really. You've got 2 of those days for your oral assessments. On each day, you'll do an interview and an advocacy, and then you have 3 days, 3 half days of written assessments, and you'll do 4 of those a day. So that's your 12 written and your 4 oral. The way that the marking works, and this is the beauty really of SQE2, is that it is an average of all of them. So when I mentioned earlier that sometimes, perhaps legal research might be a nemesis skill for people, you don't have to be brilliant at legal research. You can compensate by being better at other skills, because it all comes out in the average. But in terms of how you feel on exam day, and I think one of the key concerns, and you may kind of agree with this, is that what if I forget everything that I've learned and I just go absolutely blank in the actual assessment? So did this happen to any of you? And if it did, how did you deal with it? Sasha, if I could come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that really happened to me, to be honest. I mean, there were bits that I was a bit unsure about, and I'd sort of come out of the exam and think, oh God, I failed on that. But I think if you've done the prep, you're not going to forget everything. It will be in your brain, and you just need to really focus and put your mind on the task that you're doing. But I think it's also important for when you come out of that exam, for the next exam, to just put that exam completely behind you, which can be quite hard when you've still got, you've done your first one, saying you've still got 15 more to go. It's quite intense, but I think it's important to just focus on what's ahead rather than what's behind you.
Absolutely. Kat, what was your experience on assessment days? Did it go to plan?
Actually, interesting story. I think it was a business day assessment, like the one that I found the most complex. Is that the whole day is just business law and corporate. And I started doing the assessment, and my computer froze and nothing worked. And it took probably 15 minutes to fix those things. So I was literally in like everything went wrong, and people from assessment center came and restarted my computer, and didn't work, and they had to find some key to. It was stressful, I have to admit that, but it happened. I filled in the form. Actually, if something like this happens to you, I filled in the form, got the number that confirmed the situation that happened. And I don't know, maybe if I didn't pass, it could have been the mitigation circumstance or something like that. But things like those happen, still passed, and don't let those things distract you, or don't let this make you think that, oh, okay, I'm not going to pass just because of this. Just stay focused. And I think one of the most important things is to stay resilient. Like, it is so hard waking up every day, like 3 days in a row, going there, writing, switching your mind. But you need to stay resilient. Don't panic. Don't overthink. Don't don't kind of listen to your mind, because your mind will try to push different thoughts at different stages of this assessment. You need to stay focused. Maybe have this playlist, which is, I wish I had it, kind of, that will keep you on track. And it's just 3 days. It's not a week. It's not a month. Just 3 days.
Yeah, and often a gap in between your orals and your written to kind of give you a bit of breathing space as well. That depends on your sitting. It depends on a lot of things, but they're not 5 days back to back. There is a gap in the middle. Thank you, Kat. Kate, what was your experience on exam day?
Obviously had the playlist going in the car, so that was a good start. I had, and it's not something I've ever really believed in doing before, but I had like a little phrase that I'd say to myself, like, come on, I can do this. I am brave. I will remember, blah, 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 blah. And I just had a little phrase that I'd kind of kept saying to myself throughout revision. And before I started the exam, I'd sit there and just kind of compose myself and just say, look, it's 3 days. They're going to be tough, but once they're over, they're going to be over. So just focus. And I try to tell myself that it's okay to not know everything. You're not there to know everything. And I made sure that if I didn't know a legal rule, for example, there was one question where I had no idea. It was so nuanced, the particular exception. And we all kind of came out and just looked at each other and went, oh my God, don't talk to people either afterwards, by the way, because sometimes it just kind of gets you into that negative mindset and you have to go back in. You're not really allowed to talk anyway, but that's aside. So if you don't know the rule, I would still put something down because you're still going to get the skills mark. So as long as you put something, you're going to get a mark. Don't just not put anything, because then you're never going to get anything. And you might be correct, you might not, but if you don't put anything, then you're going to get nothing at the end of the day. So that's something I try to remember, which is quite hard to kind of stay focused. And like Kat said, regardless of what the last exam did, just go into the new one as if the last one didn't happen and just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice there. And I see in the chat there was a question about the averaging out. You don't have to pass all 16. It depends on the average of all of your scores. So although there's no kind of magic number of how many you can fail, certainly I know students who failed 3 out of those 16 and still passed SQE2 overall. So if there is something that's concerning you, or you think I'm never going to pass because I've got to do business or property or drafting or whatever it might be, it is absolutely still doable. So because of that average of all of them. So they add up all of the marks, they divide them all by the 16 assessments, and they come up with a final mark for you. And if that is above the pass mark, you've obviously passed SQE2. If it's below the pass mark, unfortunately, you would have to resit. And regardless of how many you have failed, you would have to do all 16 again. So that's the kind of downside to it. But there's far more positives about it than negatives because of that averaging system. With the LPC, you had to pass each exam individually. You don't have to do that with SQE2. So that's a really positive. So we are just a minute over 5 p.m. So we've kind of come to the end of this part of the session. Over to you, Juliet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. You gave us some absolutely incredible pieces of advice there. Amazing. Hopefully everyone in the audience is feeling motivated and slightly less daunted now by SQE2. I know that I definitely am. But for those of you in the audience, the event isn't over yet. We still have got 30 minutes left of networking. So if you've got any burning questions left over that you've not managed to get answers during this session, we've still got half an hour to get those questions, put those questions directly to some of our speakers and members of BARBRI's SQE team. So before we head over to the networking, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our panelists for giving up your time this afternoon to speak. I know that you've all got very busy schedules, so we really appreciate it. For those of you who are joining the networking session, feel free to just click on the Expo in the left-hand sidebar, and then you'll need to just click on BARBRI's banner and then head into the booth. But we'll see you there in just a moment. For those in the audience, you'll also need to head over to Expo. There should just be BARBRI's banner, and if you click on that, you can either go up in the booth, share your audio and video, or you can write your questions in the chat bar. We would really recommend going up on screen to ask your questions, just because it creates a much more interactive session and it's just a lot nicer. If you do go up on screen, we'd really recommend you coming off screen once your question's been answered, just so that we can make sure the session runs as smoothly as possible. Without further ado, I'm going to head over to the networking now, and I look forward to seeing everyone there. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.